Welcome back, everybody, to Neutrality Studies. And today we are joined again by Professor Marandi from Tehran University. Professor, welcome back.
Thank you very much for inviting me on your show again. It's a great pleasure being here.
Thank you for always taking the time of giving us updates. I basically would like to ask you what happened in the last 1.5 weeks since we last spoke. I mean, how is life in Tehran at the moment? And how are you interpreting the current state of the war now that we are basically almost finishing the fourth week?
Well, Tehran, and I can't say the same exists for the rest of the country, but Tehran is not very crowded still, of course. About 30% of the people murdered by this American-Israeli coalition are from Tehran.
Hmm.
So from the beginning of the war, a lot of people left the city. And after the first day when the Americans murdered those 168 elementary school girls and along with a couple of dozen school staff and teachers, they closed schools and universities. So a lot of they were encouraged by the government, if they don't have anything important to do here, to leave. And then we had and it was, of course, Ramadan. People were fasting. So Tehran was quiet, but it continues to be quiet now because we're in the Iranian New Year.
Yeah.
And so the Iranian New Year is sort of like Christmas and New Year in the West. That schools are closed for a couple of weeks, offices are closed for a week, but the second week is pretty quiet. People take their vacations usually during the second week, and so Tehran remains quiet, and it will remain so until about 10 days from now. Then businesses will have to open. So it is quiet. When I drove across the city yesterday, the traffic was light. They still bomb, of course. The last 2 or 3 days, the uh, the bombing has decreased. It is believed that there are two reasons, one of two reasons, or a combination of both. One is that they have a shortage of ammunition. The Americans and the Israelis, they bomb cities so much and people so much that they've run short of these weapons. And also the fighter jets, they uh, eh, they get worn down, and of course we all know that jets need to be overhauled. So this could be one reason, probably is. The second reason is that they plan to attack Iran's territory and invade. And so they may be trying to uh, prepare themselves for the attack. I would imagine it's a combination of both.
May I just
But
ask? Sorry, may I just ask, like, how many people are now the numbers, of the Iranian numbers? How many people have been killed by this onslaught so far?
the government declares numbers regularly. I don't remember, but I would imagine that um, it would be the numbers would be around 2,000 by now, or close around 2,000. Yeah, but um, but just one final point, and that is that uh, this is not necessarily the case for other cities because during the new year, people leave Tehran
Mhm.
and they go to smaller cities, smaller towns, and other big cities. And therefore, other cities may be pretty crowded. So when the Americans, let's say, bomb Esfahan, which is a very historical city with uh, uh, very, very long civilizational history, it's very crowded there right now. So, and people are, little children are traumatized, of course, if they're not killed or if they're not wounded. But these are the terrorists of our era, the pilots of the U.S. and Israeli air forces. They're the ones who bomb country after country, from Venezuela more recently, but Libya, Syria, Iraq. Gaza, of course, Yemen. So these are the terrorists of our era, and now it's Iran's turn. But the difference is that Iran is determined to beat them off, and it has the power to do so. And I see among Iranians how their morale is very high and they're very confident. I was always expecting Iran to defeat this Epstein coalition in this war, but I never imagined. I didn't think the morale among ordinary Iranians would be this high.
So, do you think that the Americans could actually be as crazy as to think and seriously plan a ground invasion, even if it is just an island or two? I mean, those would be sitting ducks, wouldn't they? I mean, the way that Iran still at the moment strikes back at Israel, at the United States, the bases and so on, isn't. Do you think they're serious about this?
Yes, I think that it is actually going to happen in the next few days, and it's not far off. It is crazy, but Trump is desperate, and he's lost the war, and he's made a catastrophic mistake. He cannot open the Strait of Hormuz. He cannot stop Iranian missile strikes and drone strikes against the Israeli regime, nor against its own assets in the Persian Gulf region. And so instead of walking away and declaring some fake victory and accepting Iran's very legitimate demands, he's going to double down. And remember, when we look at Joe Kent's resignation letter, the reason why we're in a war is not because of Iran's nuclear program, because Kent said American intelligence was clear that there was no plan by Iran to develop a nuclear weapon. And of course, Joe Kent is a Trump appointee. Um, Also, he said very clearly that Iran was not a threat to the United States. But this war goes on, or this war started, and I would add continues, because of Zionism, the Zionist lobby in the United States, and the Israeli regime. So the whole war from the very beginning, I think many of us, I've been saying it for years, that this is how it will play out, and the United States will fail. And it's happening as expected. So that was madness from day one, and so continued madness shouldn't be that surprising.
Hey, very brief intermission because I was recently banned from YouTube, and although I'm back, this can happen anytime again. So please consider subscribing not only here, but to my mailing list on Substack. That's pascalotta.substack.com. The link's going to be in the description below, and now back to the video. I mean, what can be the goal of the Americans if they actually try to bring troops into harm's way? Because there's no question that Iran will hit them, right? There's no question that these missiles and drones will fly straight into the troops and kill the troops, right? Or is there any kind of other logic that you can see?
Well, before the war, there were discussions in Iran about what is the greatest vulnerability of the United States. And some were saying that the deaths of their troops.
Mm.
And I always believed, and I've said in different gatherings, that the Americans don't care about their troops. And the Epstein class, the Zionist oligarchy, for them, these troops are just tools to be used. And even the language used by Trump and Lindsey Graham, among others, uh, clearly shows that the lives of these troops are not important. Remember, you know this better than I, but American troops are usually from the poor,
Yeah.
and the poorer classes and communities in the United States have no influence. When their kids are killed, they just die and they're buried. During Vietnam, for example, the United States had a conscript army, and except for those who had very good connections and who could escape going to Vietnam, almost everyone had to go. Their kids had to go. And so when the body bags began to accumulate and people began to learn more about the reality of Vietnam, and they began to see through the propaganda about Ho Chi Minh and about uh, the resistance in Vietnam, uh, people began to protest. And those people were of the middle class, sometimes upper middle class, and their voices could more easily be heard. These people, they're really just cannon fodder, as they say. And therefore, what can really stop the United States is a combination of things. One is for Iran to fight back and strike at these troops who are themselves, I would imagine, mostly victims of the empire, the troops themselves. But the second would be to continue keeping the Strait of Hormuz closed, because the oil and gas coming from the Strait of Hormuz and the petrochemicals, they come from countries that are invested in this war. Kuwait, the Emirates, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Qatar, they all have American bases. They all facilitate war. They've allowed the Americans from day one to use their airspace, to use their territory, to fire missiles. They are part of this war, and they're funding the Americans. At least Qatar, uh, Saudi Arabia, and the Emirates, they are funding the war. But uh, so by stopping their oil and gas, for the most part, Iran allows some to go through. Yeah, but by stopping this, what they are doing is putting real pressure on the United States. And what the United States, by taking these islands, it wants to open the Strait of Hormuz. But the problem is that Iran does not s- keep the strait closed on by the shore, by putting troops on the shoreline. That's 19th century stuff. That's 20th century stuff. They fire missiles and drones from hundreds of kilometers away. And so if the Americans want to stop those missiles and drones, they're going to have to go deep inside Iran. And that's impossible with 5,000, 10,000, 20,000, 30,000. So it seems completely foolish, but everything that Trump has done so far is foolish.
But that's why it makes no sense putting these troops there, as if though they couldn't as if could somehow be defended, and as if they could actually open the strait. Because again, you said it correctly, right? Iran lets some ships through. Iran did not categorically close this. Actually, the biggest problem is that the insurance companies do not give coverage anymore to the ships. So even if Iran said you can go, a lot of them would probably stay anchored, right? That's not the problem. So kind of talking about the Strait of Hormuz, to me, seems at the moment, when it comes from the Americans to they must open, it seems like a straw man. It's a little bit like the nuclear discussion, telling Iran you're not allowed to build a bomb, and Iran says we don't want to build a bomb. You have to sign that you will not do it. Yes, let's sign, let's have that, and then you do that, and it keeps coming. So I wonder what their strategy is when it comes to the Strait of Hormuz thing, because it seems to me like just another excuse to keep the onslaught, the warfare going. But then how you see Iran responding to this, and what this negotiation, the exchange of fire. At the end of the day, these missiles flying are actually a form of negotiation, unfortunately. Where is that going, and what are we learning from the way that the bombing negotiations are being done?
Well, right now we don't have negotiations, and Trump came out and made this claim on Monday morning, right before the markets were going to open, that negotiations are taking place, and we're going to have peace. And he delayed his threat to bomb Iran's critical infrastructure. He said he's going to obliterate Iran's uh, electrical power plants, which is, of course, which is a crime against humanity.
And as we
And if
speak
you
on this March 26th, right, in your morning, March 26th, they have not been bombed, right? This did actually not happen. The fields are fine at the moment, right?
Yes, at the moment, yes. Of course, they do bomb they bombed markets. They bombed the fish market in Isfahan. They've bombed more hospitals, many hospitals. I don't know what they have with hospitals, but they bombed many hospitals. Um, I mean, uh, I w- I've seen multiple places in Tehran that they bombed that are just apartment blocks. And sometimes, for example, a couple of days ago, they murdered a professor at one of the prestigious universities in the city of Tehran, and they wiped out everyone in the building. They slaughtered everyone just to get him, I assume. So, um, this is how it is. But they haven't targeted that critical infrastructure. So, and it's interesting when he does make those threats. No one in the West says these are crimes against humanity. No one in the Western media or among leaders in Europe or they none of them condemn this. Just like when he says, when he says he's starving the uh, people of Cuba, no one condemns it. None of the journalists in the United States or in Europe or mainstream legacy media, Epstein media controlled journalists. None of them condemn this. Strangling Cuba, you'd think that the world would be in uproar and civil society in the West would be outraged, but you don't hear any of that, and you don't hear it about Iran either. So, or Lebanon, or Gaza, or Yemen, or anywhere else. Any world where the empire is targeting. So, I going back to the main issue, we shouldn't expect rationalism or rationality from the United States because it's non-existent. So Trump, what he did on Monday morning is he said, "Okay, I'm not going to bomb Iran's critical infrastructure for the next 5 days. I'll delay it for 5 days." And that was basically for a couple of reasons. One is to bring down the price of oil and the market. He was successful in that regard. And of course, the 5 days would mean until Friday night, where the markets close,
Uh,
and we're close to that right now. So, and then he'll have the weekend, and many believe that he may actually strike on the weekend if the weather allows it. Meaning, strike the islands, attack the islands or Iran's mainland. So, the second reason is that Iran made a very, very uh, severe threat and said that if you strike our critical infrastructure, we're going to destroy the critical infrastructure on the other side of the Persian Gulf because they're complicit in this war. They're assisting you, and we will retaliate. And of course, the targets on the other side of the Persian Gulf are very easy for Iran to strike. These family, they have oil and gas, they don't have anything else. You strike that critical infrastructure, and there's really nothing left in those countries. And that will destroy the global economy. It will destroy the US economy. So Trump did back off. Doesn't mean he's going to back off for good. But so he decided to make that decision to delay it for 5 days. That ends today is uh, Thursday morning. That it ends tomorrow night. And then we have to see what he does next.
and when I said
And there's another thing. Sorry, Pascal. Just one other thing. After the fight, because he said we're negotiating, and there are no negotiations. That's fake. He sent a a a proposal through Pakistan to Iran. That's not negotiations. We've been doing that with Americans for decades, and through different countries. Sometimes it's Oman, sometimes it can be any country. So there were no negotiations. But the Iranians, when they received it, they saw it was uh, uh, not worth discussing, and the Iranians put out their own conditions in public uh, yesterday, which are sort of what I discussed earlier on your show. And I said that full reparations, facts on the ground have to change so that in future no one can attack Iran and Iran's allies in the region. They have to be part of any package in future, and so on. These were Iran's conditions. Iran's sovereignty has to be respected. But also what Trump may do, and again, I'm speculating, is that after the 5 days that we were negotiating and we almost got there, but they refused to take the final step. So we're going to intensify the war. I'm guessing that after the 5 days, he'll say, we tried, we almost got there, we gave them
Mm.
great, provided them with
Offers.
great opportunities, but they refuse, they're evil, and, the sort of thing that Trump does. And then he'll launch the ground offensive.
Um, but are we seeing now, after 4 weeks, some form of regularity, or like red lines in terms of what is being bombed, what's not being bombed? I mean, unfortunately, I think the Israelis actually attacked Iranian, not just oil facilities, but actually the nuclear power plants. And Iran shot back at Dimona, and but so far we haven't had a nuclear catastrophe yet. We don't, luckily. Are you seeing any kind of, are you seeing something that's moving in the sense of, okay, the other side, the Americans, the Israelis are backing off this one, or it seems that Iran was able to to draw this line in the sand? Is there something that you can discern?
I think they're becoming more desperate, so they're doing more risky things.
Mm.
So, for example, striking the nuclear power plant, if they actually hit it and the missile can go, astray and do that, then that could cause contamination throughout the Persian Gulf region. And that will contaminate oil, that will contaminate gas. And so the Israelis themselves can destroy uh, the oil market permanently uh, because of contamination. But it is a reckless regime. And of course, the regime in Washington is obedient to Zionists. And the Israelis don't care all that much about anything except for themselves. Uh, I mean, this war, they're driving up the price of oil right now. We're moving towards a global crisis. LNG. You're in Japan, it's a big deal right now in your country. And fertilizer, but they don't care. They don't care about the Indian economy or the Brazilian economy or the Chinese economy. They want the Americans to do their bidding because they have aspirations to take over the region, come what may. And so the Iranians, knowing that the Israelis have no red lines, they retaliated and hit Dimona and hit buildings affiliated to their nuclear program, research centers, and so on, to send them a message. And the missiles are very precise. So the Israelis recognize that if they push further, then the Iranians will push further. The only way to keep this regime at bay is to make it feel this sort of fear. But they did strike, and this I think, is an important point. But I don't know how long this will last. Last week, you recall, they struck Iran's key natural gas
Yeah.
field, the South Pars field,
Yes.
and the Iranians had said beforehand that if you strike us, we're going to strike you back much harder. And Iran did. They destroyed the key assets in Qatar, in Saudi Arabia, and in the Emirates. And that caused Trump to back off. He said, I didn't know about this. Israel will not do it again. And it shows that Iran's retaliations have an impact. And they haven't struck critical infrastructure since then. But this does not mean it won't happen again. Nothing that Trump says is ever for certain. And that's why we can't negotiate with Trump. That's why a peace deal or a ceasefire just doesn't work. That's why Iran is saying no to any ceasefire, because Trump will say one thing today and do something else tomorrow. We were negotiating once. He bombed us. He was conspiring against us 8-9 months ago. Launched a war.
Yeah.
We negotiated again, and he launched this war. And then, of course, the JCPOA itself, which was signed by the United States, he tore up. So his signature has no value to us. It would be just a worthless piece of paper. So for Iran, what needs to happen is facts on the ground have to change. And that basically means these tiny Arab dictatorships in the Persian Gulf, either they have to be removed and have the people run the country, or if they remain, they can no longer be a platform for invading Iran and murdering Iranian school children again in the future. That era is will definitely come to an end.
Two questions. Like first, with the Gulf states, we've heard yesterday actually quite reconciliatory talk. I think from Qatar, who the spokesperson said, like, we've been neighbors and we will be neighbors, and there will be a way out of this, and so on and so forth. Do you think that's a step in the right direction? How do you think that these Gulf states, can they do something in order to convince Iran to stop the bombing? Like if they say, like, okay, we cannot, this American thing has to end. And second point, are there some high value targets left in Israel that that Iran is not attacking in order to keep it as a threat, like let's say desalination plant or something that is still on the further up on the escalation ladder, that are on the threat?
Well, actually, Iran has shown a lot of restraint so far. And it first of all, as we all know, it was the victim of this war of aggression, but it only retaliates when it is struck first. And it warns the other side not to do this. And when it retaliates against like critical infrastructure in the Persian Gulf region, it warns people to empty those areas. That's not what happens in Iran. But so it warns them beforehand. Iran, the Iran and the axis of resistance can escalate far further. I mean, Iran can destroy all the oil and gas assets in the Persian Gulf, and just this would be over. But that would we don't want to destroy the global economy. We don't want to destroy the region's economy. We don't want to destroy our economy. So Iran is, and the same is true with the axis of resistance. Yemen said it's going to engage in the war, but so far that front has been quiet. In Iraq, the resistance in Iraq is striking U.S. targets, but they could do much further. They can go much further. So the axis in general is reacting to what the other side is doing. I would assume that when the United States, I mean, I'm certain that when the United States attacks Iran with ground troops, that Iran will definitely escalate in a big way. And it is already said that the country that that facilitates these troops, their key infrastructure will be destroyed. So as soon as I mean, the Iranians have not declared which country that is, but they have said that once the United States attacks that country, its key infrastructure will be destroyed. So Iran is trying to it escalates only after the other side escalates, and it threatens so that the other side doesn't escalate. Yes, there's critical infrastructure in Israel and in the region that the Iranians don't want to touch because Iran doesn't want to take the region there. But I think as things stand, that's the direction that we're moving in. I think ultimately, if Trump pushes, the Iranians will destroy the key oil and gas infrastructure and electrical power plants on the other side of the Persian Gulf. With regards to Qatar, it can be interpreted in different ways. I think that Qatar also wants Iran to focus on bombing Saudi Arabia and the Emirates more than Qatar, but Qatar is also deeply involved in this war. CENTCOM was based in Qatar. The drones that murdered General Soleimani flew from Qatar, and Qatar, of course, funded ISIS and Al Qaeda at the behest of the United States, of course, and other terror groups. Alongside, I mean, the Saudis did the same, and the others did, but Qatar was a central force, and they continued to do so when others discontinued. But in any case, traditionally speaking, Qatar, I mean, over the last decade and a half or two, Iran's relationship with Qatar has always been better than with the Saudis and the Emiratis. Uh, so it can be seen in different ways. I can't say for certain what lies behind it, but it may be a combination of all these things. They would rather Iran strike it, prioritize Saudi Arabia and the other countries rather than Qatar, because Iran hit the LNG facilities very hard after the Israelis attacked. And that, as I said, was what forced Trump to back down.
Right. It's just somehow it seems to me that the Gulf states are kind of they're being thrown under the bus, right? They're just being sacrificed by the United States and by Israel because if they get hit, it doesn't hurt them that much. And so I just there's this theory out there that Donald Trump actually wants to hurt the Gulf region and that the oil going down and the LNG going down from there is actually good for the United States and their exports because they're energy independent, and that they gonna come out as even economically as winners of this whole thing, and that in this sense Iran does a favor to the United States. How do you interpret that argument?
Yes, that's an argument that has been made for since the beginning of the war and even before the war. But I think that it is at one level true, not for the Israeli regime, but for the United States, because the oligarchs and those who own the oil business and the oil sector, who are oligarchs for the most part, they will make a killing. I mean, literally too. But American consumers and the middle class, or what's left of the middle class, they will suffer immensely, and they are already paying a price. And the U.S. economy is already doing quite poorly, as guests on your own show have discussed before. Um, you've had some very good programs on this topic in the past. People discuss the internal dynamics of U.S. society and economy. It's not going well. And I think, and with the divide that exists in the United States, I think that this is terrible news from the United States. If this war continues, and the shortage of oil and natural gas and fertilizers and petrochemicals continues to grow, and it grows by the minute, literally, then that will have a severely negative effect on the United States. Those oligarchs um, will make a lot of money, but ordinary Americans will feel the pain and suffering. It's sort of like the U.S. Armed Forces, which uh,
Yeah.
the soldiers are all from the working class, and it's not going to affect the billionaires whose kids have never shot a gun before, unless it's to hunt or for pleasure.
Yeah, which then raises the question, right? How whether this strategy can actually put the squeeze on the people who make the decisions to further conduct the war, and secondly, does Iran somehow try to mitigate the impact of the economic impact on China and its partners I mean, including India and Russia? Can you see any strategies to try to safeguard their access to oil and LNG?
Well, Iran continues to export oil to its friends, and Iran's oil on the sea in tankers is being sold, and those tankers will be all emptied relatively in a short period of time. And Iran does allow it does facilitate the movement of some tankers through the Strait of Hormuz, uh, like Bangladesh, which is vulnerable. I think they help them get a tanker through. But as you said, some of the tankers they're owned, or the the resources are the oil and gas are owned by countries that have been involved in this war. Iraq, on the other hand, for example, they have not, and I think a number of tankers have left the Persian Gulf, uh, heading towards markets, let's say, in South Asia and East Asia. So, it the Iran doesn't want this war. Iran allowed a couple of LNG tankers to leave that belonged to India, and in return, India released three tankers that they were holding, tankers full of oil that they were holding literally hostage at the behest of Trump. So, I mean, there are some little deals like that also took place. But at the end of the day, uh, if these countries in the Persian Gulf region, if instead of facilitating death and destruction, they just tell the Americans to leave and that they can no longer use their airspace or their territory and just have ordinary business relations with them, this war would not continue. It would be over because the
Really?
Americans cannot wage war on Iran without the countries on the other side of the Persian Gulf.
If the I mean the Emirates and Qatar and Saudi Arabia and Kuwait, Bahrain all say Americans go home. We hereby expel you and we publicly tell you to leave. Do you think that would have the potential to actually end the war?
If they tell American troops, they're not just ordinary Americans, ordinary
Yeah, yeah, the troops,
Iran.
troops.
Yeah. If yes, that then of course Iran would still demand reparations for all the damage that has been done so far. But that would be a huge step to just finish
Mm.
this whole thing. And Iran's conflict with these countries, except for the issue of reparations, would be over.
So do you think the strategy by now is more to convince the Americans and Israelis to stop it or to convince the Gulf states to expel the Americans? Which one do you think is more important in the strategy?
The countries in the Persian Gulf are proxies, and they don't have the ability to. I mean, they forfeited the ability to make their own decisions years ago
Mm.
by giving. When the United States brought their bases into the region, their influence was not just on the bases. They gained control of everything. And I think living in Japan, you appreciate that quite well. The US presence in Japan is not just a presence that is confined to a few military bases where soldiers do training there or no, they the a network of influence is created throughout the country where basically Japan becomes even despite all its wealth and it becomes a proxy of the United States. And we saw how when Japan was on the rise, the United States basically forced Japan to give up its economic prosperity for the sake of the United States uh, because of its enormous influence over the country. And
That
now, as Japan is also entering a deeper crisis, the United States will not allow Japan to use all the tools that are available at its disposal to deal with this crisis because of its enormous influence in the country.
this is one of the points where I'm not entirely sure. I mean, Japan maintained uh, yes, Japan is an ally, and if you wanna put it as a vassal of the US, but one that then reaps considerable benefits from it, and sometimes in critical times in the 1980s that you spoke about, was very able to kind of pretend to be giving in while still reaping extreme benefits from the outcome, how things were done. So and the structural influence on the actual political process in Japan is not as large as one would think. It's the so that's why I wonder. I mean, Japan, I am pretty sure would have the ability to at some point. Has the ability to oppose certain things. Ms. Takaichi actually did that to a little bit when she went to the United States recently by saying Japan cannot send ships. Sorry, we have a Article 9 peace constitution and we cannot. So sorry. Although she herself would like to change that one, but she used it as a pretext to say like no, we cannot do anything. So there is agency, of course. So I wonder if the agency in the Gulf Stars is not there.
No, well, I agree. I mean, I'm not saying that Japan is a complete proxy of the United States. Japan is, after all, an enormous country with a long heritage, a great, strong economy. It after world wars, it rebuilt itself. But still, the influence of the United States is not just limited within the bases.
Yeah, that is
Those bases go far beyond the influence goes far beyond those bases. Those bases are part of a network. And here is the same, but these regimes are much more weak and vulnerable, and they're family dictatorships. their policies run against the views of the people in their own countries. In the Emirates, for example, which is the most Zionist, pro-Zionist regime, my friends who live in the Emirates, and they're all exclusively Western, all of them. I don't speak to Iranians in the Emirates at all because I don't want to get anyone into trouble. So the people who I do speak to, because white Westerners have more security, their status is much higher. So my friends in the Emirates say openly that yes, the Emiratis in private conversations are very unhappy with their relationship with the Israeli regime and so on. So, but the regimes are their police states. There's full control, and the West backs them. We saw, for example, the revolution that was taking place in Bahrain. It was crushed with the support of the West and of course the other dictatorships in the Persian Gulf region. And if you look at public opinion in any of these countries, they're all against the expansion, the Israeli regime, Zionism, and the current expansionist policies of the regime. But these, as I said, these countries have given up their sovereignty a long, long time ago. So I don't see them being able to make such a move. I mean, for example, and their size, the small size of these countries and the small population, of course, has an impact. So, for example, I was invited once by the Korean government, and I had a meeting with a they invited. We were sort of like a civil society delegation, but I was invited as the head of the delegation. I was allowed to choose companions, but there were four of us. And we went and met the head in the foreign ministry, the head of, if I'm not mistaken, West Asia and Africa. That's how it was designed. I think that's how it's structured.
In Korea, you
And
said?
in South Korea, yes.
South Korea. Okay.
And when we sat and spoke, before the conversation began, uh, it was in the foreign ministry. He said, "I have to say one thing first, because it was the last day of our visit. I spoke at a couple of universities and we had questions and answers. And then he said, and he was a pretty high ranking official. He said, before we start, I have to say that, look, we're not a sovereign country. We don't make our decisions. And, so Japan, of course, being more than double the size of Korean population, despite the U.S. presence, it gets a bit more room for maneuver. South Korea, obviously less. Then Bahrain or, which are all family dictatorships, Bahrain, Qatar, Qatar population of what, 400,000? The Emirates, a population of 1.2 million, 3 million. And they forfeit their sovereignty a long time ago with these small populations, completely dependent on oil and gas, wasting trillions of dollars on useless weapons that they will never use. They can make the decisions.
Right, right. No, it's I'm more asking because the structural influence of the United States in the political process varies from country to country. I mean, Ukraine is under a completely different type of foreign U.S. controlled regime. By all of the influence in all of the different parts of society than Japan is, than Germany is, and then the Gulf states are. So my question would be like how far it is. But if I listen to you, then you would say it's very high in those Gulf states. The structural power that the United States is able to exert over their political process.
Yes, and they may dislike each other, which they do. I mean, the conflict between as you know, the conflict between Saudi Arabia and the Emirates has grown a lot over the past year, and we saw it play out in Yemen, South Yemen, for example. But and of course Qatar and the Saudis and Emiratis dislike each other. But when it comes to U.S. influence, they call the shots, really.
Right. Okay, in that case, I mean, again, we are still in the fourth week, and it seems that we have to wait and see what's going to happen. Is there anything toward the end of this of this interview that you would like to still point out or share with us, or did we cover most of the important things?
Well, something somewhat personal, actually.
Oh yes,
Not
the bounty on your head. I'm sorry, I forgot to ask about that. I saw that.
Yes, it's not something that deters me, but I think it is important for people to know how the West is really functioning. So on Twitter, I have a bounty on my head, a a verified account, which also has which has paid partnership. They put a bounty on my head. They're crowdfunding to gather $1 million. It's an Israeli Ukrainian entity. Shady. No one. I don't. No one can tell me exactly who they are. I would imagine it's Mossad and affiliated. But they are crowdfunding, gathering. They want to gather $1 million to kidnap me, and which of course would probably, I mean, lead to torture and murder. But the point is that thousands, many thousands, possibly tens of thousands of people have complained, and Twitter refuses to remove it. No Western journalists, and of course, I know many Western journalists, and many of them follow me either with their main accounts or with their second accounts. None of them have contacted me. None of them have made an issue about this. CNN, which they know me quite well, the BBC, they know me very well, Sky News, they know me very well, and the list goes on. The Guardian, the Independent, they all know me. The Times of London, they all know me. None of them will say a thing about it. None, of course, no investigation. No politician will say anything about it. And this is, in my opinion, a big deal, not because of me. I will do what I have to do. And if I'm kidnapped or killed, or the threat of being kidnapped and killed is not going to change how I do things. I mean, when I see these young kids on the streets of Tehran at the demonstration supporting the armed forces and the leader and condemning the Israeli regime and supporting Palestinians, and then the U.S. and Israelis fire missiles at them, and they literally do. As I think maybe we discussed earlier, I'm not
Yeah.
sure, but I was at one of those rallies, and a woman was killed. People were unfazed. They did not move. These young men and women stood their ground. If they stand their ground, I cannot do anything else but stand my ground. But what is important is for people to recognize that social media in the West, they are tools of empire,
Yeah.
and
But
they can be used for the most outrageous things. Whereas right now they just bombed Tehran. Whereas
mm,
I don't know if you heard it, but whereas I've had many of my tweets, I mean, I've been removed from Instagram years ago, and I don't have an account. I've been removed from Facebook years ago. I don't have an account there either. But I've had many tweets on Twitter which have been removed. I've been forced to remove. For example, I put a picture of dead kids in Gaza, and then I'd say it right above it, Western civilization. They would delete it, and they would tell me, if you do not remove this, you will not have access to your account. So I have to remove tweets that are not about, they're not threats. They're just saying they're killing kids.
yeah.
And then they can gather money to kidnap and probably torture and kill me. And it's not going to be removed. There's no investigation. There's no interest in the Western media. So when I say, because sometimes some people say, why do you say the Epstein class? When I say the Epstein class, it's because it is a certain class of people, utterly corrupt, without any moral boundaries, that own not just these governments, but they own the media too.
Yeah.
They are in full control.
Yeah, they do. And the tweet you're talking about, I mean, the people who put that out, who do the crowdfunding, they even pay Twitter to distribute the tweet further, right? It's a paid kind of a tweet Twitter advertisement on X. And that is being allowed. And it's again, it's
It's still
they
there.
want to put a
They've
bounty on
not,
your head.
the tweet is there, the account is there. It's just quite stunning. It's been there for a week now. I joke with my family. I say, look, the people who are going to turn me in are in this building or like in this gathering. But 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 it is very distressing for my family. It is
No, of
very
course.
distressing for my loved ones and for my friends.
Of
But
course.
the issue is not me. I'm making this issue is so that people understand who Elon Musk is, who what the Guardian is, what the New York Times is, what it the Washington Post is, CNN is. they're not like it's not like one monolithic um, set of uh,
Entity.
media outlets. They're not identical. They have just like Qatar and the Emirates don't like each other. But at the end of the day, they're controlled by the same class, the same oligarchy, Zionist oligarchy that that call the shots, and they have their own differences, obviously, among themselves. But they have very similar interests too.
Yes, they do. And look, I'm very sorry that this is happening to you and that people are trying to put a like do crowdfunding to put a bounty on your head, which is disgusting in and of itself. That this is being distributed is again also very disgusting, and it shows very well the double standards, the hypocrisy, and so on and so forth of this entire process that we're in, and the West as a really quite a monster. I mean, doing this and allowing this, and then also running it through civil society. But unfortunately, that's where we are. Professor Marandi, for people who want to follow you, they should go first and foremost to your Twitter, and to your Twitter X account. I'll try to link it below here. I will also we will talk again. I thank you for all the updates that you're giving and the analysis. Anything to add?
No, I just want to thank you for all the excellent work you do.
Thank you, and thank you for reporting from Tehran for us, Professor Marandi. See you next time.
See you. Bye for now.